Imagine for a moment that an explorer from a distant galaxy has just touched down on Earth. Of all the things that might shock them, that is our technology, our cities, our weather, the one thing that would truly baffle them is the overwhelming diversity of life. Even for those of us who live here, the numbers are staggering. Think about this. There are over 20,000 different species of ants alone. Nature has designed more than 28,000 types of fish. There are 20,000 varieties of orchids and a massive 3 lakh species of beetles. It is a level of variety that is almost impossible for the human mind to fully grasp. When ecologists and biologists look at this diversity of life, they don't see numbers, they see a mystery. They find themselves asking the big why and how questions that define our understanding of nature. Why are there so many species? And has this planet always been this crowded with life? How did all this diversification actually happen over time? Does the biosphere need this many players to keep working? If we had half of the species at present, would our world still function the same way? Finally, we arrive at the question that hits closest to home. How do humans benefit from this diversity? We are not just observers of this variety, we are participants in it. Every species, from the smallest beetle to the deepest sea fish, plays a role in the system that supports our own survival. Over the course of this lecture, we are going to dive into how this vast biological wealth keeps our world stable and what we stand to lose if it disappears. When we hear the word biodiversity, most of us think of different animals or plants. But sociobiologist Edward Wilson, who popularized the term biodiversity, wanted us to see something much deeper. He explained that diversity is not just about the number of species. It also tells about the variety of macromolecules inside single cell and stretches all the way to massive biomes like deserts and rainforests. It is the total variety of life at every single level of biological organization. To make sense of this, we generally break biodiversity down into three main pillars. First is genetic diversity. That is, first we look inside a species. Even if two plants look the same, their genetic blueprints might be different. Take the medicinal plant Rauwolfia, which is found in the Himalayas. Depending on where it grows, its DNA changes the strength of the medicine it produces. Or look at your dinner plate. India alone has over 50,000 different strains of rice and more than 1,000 varieties of mango. That is the genetic diversity in action. Second is species diversity. Next, we move up to the species level. This is where we compare different regions. For example, if you visit the Western Ghats in India, you will find a much higher variety of amphibians like frogs and toads than you would in the Eastern Ghats. It's simply richer in types of life. Third is ecological diversity. Compare a country like Norway to a country like India. While Norway is beautiful, India has an incredible mix of deserts, rainforests, coral reefs, and alpine meadows. This variety of landscapes is what we call ecological diversity. Here is the ground reality. It took millions of years of evolution to build this biological wealth. But at the rate we are going, we could lose it all in less than 200 years. This is no longer just a topic for textbooks, it is a global crisis. People everywhere are beginning to realize that our own survival and well being are tied directly to this diversity. Protecting it is not just about saving plants and animals, it is about saving the very systems that keep us alive. How many species are there on Earth and how many in India? How many species live on Earth? It sounds like a simple question, but the answer is a bit of mystery. According to the records we have right now, mostly from the IUCN, we have discovered and named about 1.5 million species of plants and animals. But here is the catch, that is just the beginning. While we have done a good job cataloging life in cooler, temperate countries, the tropical rainforests are still hiding millions of secrets. Some scientists guess there could be 20 or even 50 million species. But the most respected estimate by scientist Robert May puts the number at roughly 7 million. That means we have only identified about 22% of the life on our own planet. If we look at the 1.5 million species we do know, the breakdown is fascinating. Animals are the majority. That is, over 70% of all recorded species are animals. Plants make up only about 22%. Among those animals, insects are the undisputed kings. Out of every 10 animals on Earth, 7 of them are insects. Here is a fact that surprises many. There are more species of fungi in the world than all the species of fish, amphibians, reptiles, and mammals combined. However, there is an invisible group we have not even counted it, that is bacteria or prokaryotes. Because these microbes are hard to grow in labs, they are not in the official tally. If we used modern DNA testing to count them, their numbers would likely run into the millions. Now let us zoom in on India. India is a biological powerhouse. Even though we only have about 2.4% of the world's land, we host over 8% of the world's total species diversity. This is why India is recognized as one of the 12 mega diversity countries in the world. So far, we have recorded about 45,000 plant species and nearly 90,000 animal species in India. But if Robert's May's math is right, there are likely 1 lakh plants and 3 lakh animals in our forests and oceans that have not even been named yet. This leads us to a race against time. To find and name all these hidden species, we would need an army of trained experts and decades of work. But here is the tragedy. Many of these species are going extinct before we even find them. Think of it this way. Nature's biological library is on fire, and we are losing books before we have even had a chance to write down their titles. Protecting biodiversity is not just about science, it is about saving the stories of life before they vanish forever. Let us see patterns of biodiversity. Imagine you are traveling from the icy North Pole down towards the warm equator. As you move, you will notice a striking pattern. Life becomes more crowded and diverse. This is the latitudinal gradient. To put this in perspective, let's look at birds. In frozen Greenland, you will find only about 56 species. Move down to New York and that number rises to 105. But once you hit the tropics, like in Colombia or India, the number explodes to over 1200 or 1400 species. The undisputed champion is the Amazon rainforest. It is home to 40,000 plant species, thousands of birds and fish, and millions of insects still waiting for a name. A single acre in Amazon can have 10 times more plant variety than an acre in the American Midwest. Why is the equator so special? Scientists point to three main reasons. Unlike the North, which was repeatedly buried under glaciers during ice ages, the tropics stayed undisturbed for millions of years. This gave life a long, quiet time to evolve and branch out. Next reason is tropical weather does not have wild seasonal swings. It is constant. This stability allowed animals to become specialists, carving out very specific niches for themselves. Third reason is the tropics get the most sunlight. More sun means more plants, that is more productivity, and more plants provide a bigger buffet to support more animal species. Now, while exploring the South American jungles, the great naturalist Alexander von Humboldt noticed something else. The more area you explore, the more species you find. It sounds obvious, right? If you look at a larger forest, you will see more types of birds. But Humboldt found that this only happens up to a limit. If you were to graph this, it creates a curve called a rectangular hyperbola. However, if you look at it on a logarithmic scale, it turns into a clean straight line. Scientists use the equation log S is equal to log C plus Z into log A. The most important letter here is Z. This is the slope of the line. In small areas like a single state, the slope is usually shallow, that is 0.1 to zero point 0.2. But when you look at an entire continents, the slope becomes much steeper, up to 1.2. What does a steeper slope mean? It means that in massive continental areas, species richness increases much more rapidly as you expand your search. For example, fruit eating birds in tropical forests show a very steep slope of 1.15, proving just how packed these large tropical zones really are. So, whether we look at the globe from the north to south or look at the size of the land itself, the message is clear. Biodiversity is not random. It follows rules of time, energy, and space. Understanding these patterns is our first step in realizing just how much we have to protect. Now, let us see the importance of species diversity to the ecosystem. We have talked about the staggering number of species on Earth, but that leads us to a tough question. Does it actually matter if we have 20,000 species of ants versus 15,000? Would your life change if one tiny tree frog in the Western Ghats went extinct? For a long time, ecologists debated this. They suspected that more species made a community more stable, but they needed to define what stability actually means. A stable ecosystem is like a well run business. Its productivity, that is, growth, stays steady year after year. It can bounce back from a disaster like a fire or a drought, and it is tough enough to keep out alien or invasive species. Ecologist David Tillman decided to test this with long term outdoor experiments. He planted different plots of land with varying numbers of species and watched them for years. His findings were clear. 1. Plots with more species did not fluctuate wildly. Their total biomass stayed stable year to year. 2. More diversity actually led to higher productivity. In short, a diverse ecosystem is not just prettier, it actually works harder and more reliably than a simple one. To help us understand the danger of losing species, Stanford ecologist Paul Ehrlich gave us a brilliant analogy called the rivet popper hypothesis. Imagine that our Earth is a giant aeroplane and every single species on the planet is a rivet. That is one of those small metal bolts holding the plane together. Now imagine every passenger starts popping a rivet out to take home as a souvenir. At first, the plane keeps flying. Losing one or two rivets from a seat or a window does not seem like a big deal. The system feels fine. But as more and more rivets are removed, the frame of the plane becomes dangerously weak. And most importantly, which rivet you pull matters. If you pop a rivet from the wing, what we call a key species that drives major functions, the plane is not just weakened, it crashes. Removing a top predator or a primary pollinator is like pulling a bolt out of the engine. You might not see the catastrophe coming until it is too late to fix. We are currently popping rivets from our planetary airplane at an alarming rate. We may not feel the plane shaking yet, but science tells us that rich biodiversity is not just a luxury, it is the very thing holding our flight together. Our survival depends on keeping those rivets exactly where they belong. Now let us see about loss of biodiversity. While nature takes millions of years to create a species, humans are causing them to vanish in the blink of an eye. The IUCN Red List tells a haunting story. In just the last 500 years, we have lost 784 species. You might recognize some of these names. They are the now ghosts of our planet. The dodo from Mauritius, the kagga from Africa, the thylacine, the Tasmanian tiger from Australia. Even three subspecies of tiger, the Bali, Javan, and Caspian, are gone forever. Right now, the situation is even more critical. Over 15,500 species are currently staring at extinction. This includes nearly a quarter of all mammals and a staggering 32% of all amphibians. Earth has seen mass extinctions before, five of them actually over the last 3 billion years. But what we are witnessing now is the sixth extinction. What is the difference? The speed. Species are disappearing 100 to 1000 times faster than they ever did in pre human times. Ecologists warn that if we don't change course, half of all species on Earth could be wiped out in the next 100 years. When a region loses its diversity, it loses its strength. The plants produce less, the land becomes vulnerable to drought, and the natural cycles of water and pests begin to break down. Why is this happening? Scientists call the four main drivers the evil quartet. One is habitat loss. This is the biggest threat. This is the number one killer. Take the tropical rainforests. They used to cover 14% of the earth. Now they cover less than 6%. As you listen to this, hectares of the Amazon, the lungs of our planet, are being cleared for soya beans or cattle. When we break a large forest into small fragments, animals that need to migrate simply cannot survive. Second is overexploitation, that is, from need to greed. Humans have always used nature, but when need turns into greed, species die out. The passenger pigeon and Steller's sea cow were hunted to total extinction. Today, we are seeing this in our oceans, where overfishing is pushing many commercial fish to the extinction. Third is alien invasions, that is, unwanted guests. Sometimes we bring new species into an area, like the Nile perch in Lake Victoria or water hyacinth in India. These aliens often take over, choking out the local species. In India, the illegal introduction of the African catfish is currently threatening our own native river fish. Fourth is co-extinction. It is also called the domino effect. Nature is a web. When one species dies, the ones that depend on it also die. If a specific fish goes extinct, the unique parasites that live on it vanish as well. If a flower's only pollinator dies, the flower is soon to follow. It is a tragic chain reaction. The evil quartet is not just a list in a textbook, it is a description of how we are dismantling the life support system of our planet. As we move into our final discussion on conservation, remember, we are not just losing bugs and weeds, we are losing the rivets of our own aeroplane. Next, we will discuss about biodiversity conservation. Why should we conserve biodiversity? Why should we bother saving biodiversity? The most obvious reason is it's our greatest resource. On narrowly utilitarian side, think about your daily life. Every grain of rice, every piece of fruit, and the timber in your home comes from nature. But the real treasure is in our medicine cabinets. Over 25% of all modern drugs come from plants. Around 25,000 species are used in traditional medicines globally. We are currently bioprospecting, which is like a high tech treasure hunt that is searching through the DNA of tropical plants for the next cure for cancer or a future miracle drug. If we lose the forest, we lose the pharmacy before we have been even finding it. Now, let's look at the broadly utilitarian side. These are the ecosystem services, the jobs nature does for free that would cost us trillions to replicate. Take the Amazon rainforest. It generates 20% of the entire planet's oxygen. If you want to know what's that's worth, just look at a hospital bill for a single cylinder of oxygen and multiply that by the whole world. Then think about pollination. Bees, birds, and bats move from flower to flower, allowing us to grow fruits and seeds. Could we do that by our hand? The cost would be astronomical. And finally, there are intangibles. What is the price tag on the peace you feel walking through a quiet forest? Or the joy of seeing a flower bloom? You can't put a value on birds' song, but a world without it would be a much poorer place to live. Finally, we move beyond money and services to the ethical argument. This is the belief that we share this planet with millions of other species, from giant whales to tiny microbes. Philosophically, every species has an intrinsic value. This means they have a right to exist simply because they are here, not because they do something for humans. We have a moral debt to the past and a duty to the future. We inherited a biological legacy that is millions of years old. Our job is not to spend that wealth until it's gone, but to act as its guardians, ensuring that the generations born 100 years from now inherit a planet that is still vibrant and alive. So, whether you care about the economy, the air you breathe, or the moral right of a tiger to exist, the conclusion is the same. Conserving biodiversity is not an option, it is a necessity. We are the only species capable of destroying this web of life, which means we are the only ones capable of saving it. How do we conserve biodiversity? When it comes to saving life on Earth, scientists use two primary strategies. Think of the first as in situ or on site. This is the save the forest to save the tiger approach. By protecting the entire ecosystem, we protect everything living inside it. But sometimes, a species is so close to the brink of extinction that it cannot survive in the wild anymore. That's when we use ex situ conservation or off site conservation. This is like an emergency room for nature, taking the individual out of the danger zone to give it specialized care. We know we cannot protect every square inch of the planet at once. So, conservationists have identified biodiversity hotspots. These are regions that are incredibly rich in species but also under extreme threat. There are 34 of these hotspots worldwide. Even though they cover less than 2% of Earth's land, they are so densely packed with life that protecting them could reduce mass extinctions by 30%. In India, we have three: the Western Ghats and Sri Lanka, the Indo Burma region, and the Himalayas. In India, we turn these areas into biosphere reserves, 14 in total, national parks, 90 in total, wildlife sanctuaries, 448. But conservation is not just a government policy, it is in our blood. India has a long history of sacred groves, which are forest patches protected by local communities for religious reasons. In places like the Khasi Hills of Meghalaya, these sacred groves are often the very last refuge for plants that have disappeared everywhere else. When on site protection is not enough, we move to ex situ methods. You have seen these in the form of zoological parks, botanical gardens, and safari parks. Some animals today only exist in these parks because they have vanished from the wild. But modern science has taken this even further. Cryopreservation. We can now freeze the sperms and eggs of threatened species for years. In vitro fertilization. We can fertilize eggs in a lab to boost population numbers. Seed banks. We keep vaults of seeds from different plant strains to ensure that if a crop fails or a species dies out, we can literally replant it from scratch. Finally, we must remember nature does not care about political borders. A migrating bird doesn't know when it crosses from one country to another. Therefore, conservation is a global responsibility. The world came together twice for this purpose. Once during the Earth Summit 1992, which took place in Rio de Janeiro. Nations agreed that they must use biodiversity sustainably. Second time during the World Summit 2002. In Johannesburg, 190 countries pledged to significantly reduce the rate of biodiversity loss. As we conclude, remember that whether it is through a massive national park or a high tech seed bank, the goal is the same: to stop the sixth extinction and keep our planetary airplane flying.